Hello, hello. Welcome to episode 44 of Wise Wednesdays with RK. My guest today is Pauline. I met her at the Women's Economic Forum in 2017. What we had that day was a very magical conversation, and somehow she stuck in my heart because we've been following each other's work and have this mutual sense of respect. And who is Pauline? She is the conversation maker. She is the CEO of Corporate Heart International. She's an author. She's an international speaker. She is the real synergy. She has conversations on real synergy for men and women as leaders. Okay, she's the Chief Cultural Officer at My Crisis Management, My CEO Crisis Management, and she is an absolutely magical conversationalist. So without further ado, I bring Pauline into the conversation, and here she is. Hi, Pauline.
Hi there, Ruka. Wonderful to see you again.
Thank you. I was supposed to play the show reel, but I was super excited about having you on board. So many attributes, so many things that you do. I was like, oh, forget the show reel. But if it's okay with you, and for the purpose of the others, for the new people who are joining the conversation, would it be okay if we play it and let them know what Wise Wednesdays is all about?
Yes, please. Yeah.
All right, then, let's do this. Wise Wednesdays started on April 1st with a humble episode on forgiveness. Between then and now, we've had heart-led conversations on happiness, stress management, relationships, resilience, public speaking, respecting boundaries, self-discovery, mindset, just being, listening, reclaiming your life, intuition, and even food. I would like to thank all my listeners and the guests who gave me their time and trust. It is because of you that we kept going. It is because of you that we kept growing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so, so much.
Wow.
Thank you so much. So yes, that's how it began. And here we are today, 44 episodes strong. Thank you for saying yes, Pauline.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I love the fact that you've also done 700 lives. Is that right?
No, I started doing Wise Wednesdays when it was 700. Today, I stood at 1,010.
Wow. That is wonderful. That is such a wonderful impact in the world.
Thank you.
I think it's so important. And I remember so clearly the day that we met, because it was by accident, but of course nothing is by accident. But there were 1,500 people at that conference, and we bumped into each other literally in about the last hour of the conference when we were about to leave.
True.
So I think that was amazing.
Yes. So topic of discussion today is dissolving difficult conversations. Mm-hmm. And you're a maestro at this. So tell us, what does that mean to you?
Well, it's very interesting because I think it's about misunderstandings and really trying to look into what is a difficult conversation, and also what impact does it make. And I think the reason I love my work is that I've always liked very fluid conversations, very magical conversations all my life, ever since I was a kid. I remember at school being told I talk too much. Well, maybe that's true. But I was always fascinated in talking with people, so not at people, but with people, listening, what's going on. At school, people would come to me, and it sounds like it would be gossip, but it wasn't. It was like, what's going on? Who's doing what? And I've got a sort of very mathematical mind, and I used to kind of store information and then deliver it out. And now I see the world as very chaotic. It's very crisis driven. Obviously, we've got the pandemic, we've got changes in our lives. But even before that, so many times people are at odds with each other. Either they misunderstand each other, or they they have such polarized views about something, they can't get to an agreement. So I really thought, well, where's the magic in conversations is when you actually get past difficulties and look at differences. And that was my passion in looking at myself. How was I managing my own conversations? Who was I as a woman in my world, as a teenager, as a young mom, as a budding entrepreneur back in my 40s. I've been around a long time. But actually now watching the world and watching what's going on, there's lots of people sitting inside difficult conversations and holding on to them. And I wouldn't really understand why they do that, because it's very damaging. It's very damaging on our personal health to live with difficult conversations, because the first difficult conversation is the one with yourself, but we'll come to that in a minute. But, we damage our health, we damage relationships, we damage our world by staying in that difficulty. So that's why I set out to find out how to have a magical conversation. And inside that, who was I as a woman? How did I get on with other women? How did I get on with men, with my brothers and sisters? And how does that impact everything in our world? The business, family, social life, what's our vision? Everything about who I am as an individual. And in fact, it was my daughter who mentioned, and she forgets this, but it was definitely her. It was about 15, 16 years ago. She said, "Oh, Mum, you should be the president of Magical Conversations." And I remember saying to her that I think president is a bit grand. So I decided that I would call myself the ambassador of Magical Conversations. And the reason I mention that is I produced myself a little business card with just that on it. Yes. And I tried it out. And what I was amazed at was people would react very positively to it without even knowing what it was. Even serious businessmen, lawyers, I was at a party, an evening business networking party, and these male lawyers, they all said, "Oh, yes, we need that." And I thought, how fascinating, because it didn't actually tell you what it was. It emoted something in them. And I think we need some magic in our life now.
Absolutely.
So that's where I started from, Ruka. And what I do is I help people to help themselves. And I think that's a very important part of this message. I'm not telling people what to do and be. I'm inviting them to say, well, do you want to live with difficult conversations, or would you like to dissolve those? And when we dissolve those, what comes in its place? Magical conversations, creative conversations, conversations that alert you to new ideas. And we're all in the uncertainty of the unknown at the moment. We have no idea what we are going into, but we do know is it's changing rapidly. We're working from home, we're working on screen, we're almost in a vacuum in one sense, and then invited to meet the whole world in another.
Just like you are right now.
Well, that's right, and you're in Dubai, is that right?
Yes, I am.
Now, I've never visited Dubai. I would love to come there one day, but I feel like I'm in Dubai today. And that's the magic. I'm in Las Vegas. I'm from Great Britain. I'm from London originally. I lived in Malaysia for 4 years. I experienced a whole different culture there. And now I'm in the USA culture, and really understanding the culture of change in the whole world, which is, dare we say, is quite chaotic at the moment, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And that's why these conversations are so important. And I love what you said about the ambassador of magical conversations, because when I introduce myself to people and say I'm a smile strategist, I definitely have their attention, because they don't know what it is, but they're really interested. And then I wear a little badge, a smiley badge, when I'm officially presenting, or so they're like, okay, so what is that? And then they listen in. And speaking of listening in, we have friends listening in.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. We've got Curtis watching. He says, good morning.
Oh, good morning, Curtis.
And we have Hillary, who says,
my friend from England, and Curtis is from Canada. So we're getting around the world. This is good.
Oh, yes, we are. And she says, and then we have Patty.
Oh, Patty's in California. Hi, Patty.
So she says, look at self, manage your own conversations with self. And she agrees that magic is key.
Oh, Patty is a dear friend of mine and a great supporter of my work. And I think it's really important today with us in different parts of the world to really understand that even if we can't travel at the moment, we can't actually be touching each other. We can touch each other in our words and in our heart and in our sentiment. And I just want to reference your smile, because I do believe that, the word smile, the word magic, words are very emotive, and we need to use them carefully. So when we use negative words, they're also emotive in the wrong way. And we know that from people who do energy work. If you muscle test a body and you throw negative words at it, it will become weak.
Yeah.
And yet at the moment, we have a lot of people in all sections of the world, in leadership, in business, in politics, in government, in families. The tensions are very, very ripe at the moment. We are living in a very strange environment. So we have to have, as Patty alluded to, we have to have the difficult conversation with ourselves, because I think and that's the first place of understanding value creation. So this cycle that's sitting on the board behind me is a very important part of the magical conversation. If we don't have a value for ourselves, then we can't get going. There's a nothingness. Now, if that value is a negative value, it feeds negative cycle. So we don't want that. We want to find something in our world every morning, every evening, every part of our day that adds value. And if people are struggling and saying, well, I don't know what that is, I'm just feeling really bad today, then try just looking at the sky or out the window, or do some breathing. It does anything to know that you're real, you're human, you're genuine. And then start looking at, okay, what are my natural gifts? What do I do well? And can I smile? This is where it comes back to what you're saying, is that I remember writing in my diary when I was 17 that I was doing a self-critique, as one does at that age. And I was sort of, I wish my eyes were bigger, and I like my hair, but I don't like this. I do like this, or whatever. But I plan to smile because it makes me feel good, and it seems to have a good impact on other people. And I remember writing in the diary, I've still got it, it's saying, I don't understand why some adults don't do this, because it's free. Now, we might say, well, maybe today I don't have much to smile about. There can always be days like that. But that's why I say we find something that is worth smiling about, something that makes us just giggle a bit, maybe. And that's where the magic starts. So as we look at this cycle, we can then give that to other people. So the arrows are very simple, and you can just see them there. Is, the first arrow is me, it's you. And that moment that we met in the lobby of the hotel in Delhi,
yes,
hundreds of people packing their bags up, and some reason, we got together. That was in the next arrow, which was we became a little relationship in that moment. We had a little magical conversation. Hi, how are you? What did you think about the event? That created a bond. And it was, for everybody watching, it was the Women Economic Forum. So it was actually 1,500 women. There were a few men, but very, very few. So it was a very feminine, female energy conference. And we were all quite hyped up by the end of the week. We were very elated. And so we met in that wonderful space. And then we created something. The red arrow is about what do we create for the world?
Yep.
And this was taken us three and a bit years to meet up, but we've been watching each other.
Yep.
And I know that you watch some of my comments, and I've been watching yours. And it's that energy that we put out in the world that makes this value cycle continually circle. And as it expands, it's actually difficult to have difficult conversations. Magical conversations become much easier if you have this point of view. So it's all about going to the core of who you are, and the core of what you want in the world, what you desire, what you set out to ripple in the world. And I have a little, what do you call it, with core. So, sorry, my brain doesn't work very well at this age, but core stands for choice, ownership, responsibility, and energy.
Wow.
So you can make a choice any moment to smile. You can make a choice to say, okay, things are not going too well, but I'm going to get up, I'm going to brush my hair, I'm going to put my makeup on, I'm going to smile, I'm going to have my cup of lemon water, I'm going to start the day. So that's the choice we have. And then O is ownership. And this is really important. It's owning the words that you use. And just watch what words you use. You know, do you use good, positive words, smiley words? You know, do you spend a lot of the day giving gratitude? Do you give compliments to people? I love to write to people and you know, give them compliments. Tell them they're beautiful. Say their best. You know, this is how we seed the field of magical conversations. So the R is responsibility, is taking responsibility for yourself. And that was something my parents taught me many, many years ago. Always take responsibility. When you're in a place, what can you do to help? You know, if you live in the community, can you be on the committee? If you are going into a business, are you smiling at the person at the door as well as the client in the boardroom? And then E is just your energy. What do you do to make sure that you're energized? And that could be anything from making sure you eat breakfast in the morning to going out for a walk with the dog, which I do. You know, especially in lockdown, when we're not going out and doing all the normal things we used to do, it's really important to add those in. And then that becomes part of your plus list at the beginning of the day, when maybe you've read the news and you don't like what's going on in the world, you can actually look at your own world. So that's what I call value creation. It's a very continuous cycle. I kind of imagine that it's like a life jacket. You know, like if you were in the sea and you couldn't swim, you would throw somebody a life ring so you could float. Yep. And that's my life jacket.
Love it. Love it. Absolutely love it. And Patty says, one second, she says, your book, Magical Conversation, is a sweet handbook that offers tremendous value, Dr. Pauline. Yes, it does.
Oh, Patty was there right at the beginning when I launched this book back in 2019, I think it was, beginning of that. And Patty was one of my best contributors and actually won the prize of a Kindle in order to read my book on ebook. And I'm hoping to relaunch it again with a little bit of an update because of the pandemic and how we deal now with this different way of living and different way of having magical conversations. But the sentiment is still there. So the value creation is really important. And the other thing I want to just mention here is, this is really important, is the three basic rules are no judgment, no anger, and no coercion. So what I mean by that is if we can move away from judgments and use our valuable experience to share how we feel about a certain topic, then we start a magical space in which the conversation can develop. There's some conversations, maybe with somebody who has very opposite views to you, you can still have a magical conversation. And the no anger is, we can have lots of passion and energy and foresight, but if we get into anger, we get into conflict. It destroys the rhythm of having something that flows. And that's why I say no anger. And when I actually run sessions with my clients, if somebody gets a little bit edgy towards anger, because people always say this to me, you know, what happens if? I say, well, one politely invites that person to honor the rules. And this is about our life, is if we set rules and boundaries that are valuable, then we invite people to honor them. So if somebody's getting very opinionated, very angry, one would suggest that in this space, that's not part of the rules. If they would like to stay, we welcome them to honor the rules. If they'd like to leave, we honor that too, and there's no issue. And they may like to take that conversation somewhere else. So it sounds a little bit like avoidance, but I believe that when you're seeding creativity and that going into the unknown, where people can be tense, we don't want to be angry in that space. I mean, I personally, and I understand when anger does arise, but in that space of magical seeding the creativity of something different, it's not appropriate. So when I work with creating a new narrative, we're looking at something that's different, that hasn't been here before. And in my future world, I don't want a world of anger, because that ends up as war. There can be, as I say, passionate discourse and valuing people's opinions, which may be diverse. That's okay. But again, it's going back to, do we want to dissolve the difficulty, or do we want to embrace the difference? That is different. Do you understand what I mean?
Absolutely. And I love that. So when you speak of dissolve the difficulty or embrace the difference, I'd like to again bring your attention to another topic, another area of your expertise, which is the male and female conversation, the gender conversations. So is there a difference in the way Venus and Mars think?
Yes, well, absolutely. And I think, again, it's all about valuing the differences, honoring the differences. And in order to honor or value differently they are, and we know them in the context of us as human beings. So we might be totally differently polarized about some issue, but as human beings, we've got some wonderful similarities and amazing differences, which are all part of our uniqueness. So when I say, we've got similarities, I would say, well, when you're breathing, you're alive, and when you're not breathing, you're not alive. There's a very basic. Do most people desire to be in a happy, loving place? I would hope so. So looking at Mars and Venus, as it was originally called with Dr. John Gray's book, yes, men and women, I believe, are different. But what I've looked at is, how do we understand the subtle differences between different types of men and different types of women, and different generations, different sexual orientations, different cultures, different parts of the world? I'm in my 70s. I'm a baby boomer. You're younger than me. You're in a different generation. My grandkids are digital kids. They're 10 and 13. The world is very different from a generational point of view. Living in Malaysia taught me so much about being in a totally different culture, with different religions, different ways of being. Extraordinary culture, very different to the UK and what I was used to in my life. And now in America, again, it's different again. I mean, a simple thing like, my belief was that Americans spoke English. I realized that English and American is quite different language on occasion, and my husband and I laugh about that. But it's very important when we get to personal differences. So there's two factors here. One is that we have physicality and biological differences. And what I looked at was, I know I'm a female, but I'm quite a masculine-minded female. Does that mean I'm a male? No. And it's not about, I have wonderful LBGT clients as well, and they love my map because the map is inclusive. So what I thought was looking at behavior, because if you like, the behavioral part of a difficult conversation is attached to the emotional part of it, but it comes out as a contest, a fight, or something that affects us. So our operating patterns are different. And the male operating pattern is much more straight line. It's much more structured into a series of squares that we know from evidence the men are very yes-no people. They're very either-or, task-focused. Now, that doesn't mean that that's everything about the way they are, but that's the baseline. And women have a different, so they have testosterone. Women are different. We have a very circular emotional template. We have hormones which are driven by estrogen and progesterone, and we have we have the ability to have children. It doesn't mean that all women have to have children, but we all have this cycle, life cycle, menstrual cycle, and we tend to like to see the world as a very and everybody says women are great multitaskers.
Everyone, yes.
And
we bring everybody together.
And what's interesting, Ruka, I did some work with men-only groups and women-only groups, and I invited the men to state, how do you describe women? How do you describe men? And the women, how do you describe women? How do you describe men? The word nurture only comes up with a reference to describing women, by women or by men. And although men can be nurturers, they don't tend to use that word. They would probably use other words, maybe caring, providing. But it's interesting. No, providing, they see themselves as the provider and the protector.
Protecting, yes, that's what I said. Protective. Protective,
which could be translated as nurturing, but it's just not a word that is in their vocabulary as easily as for women. So what I look at is that there's two different operating patterns, a bit like having a PC and a Mac. So we had two different computers. We know that there are certain people like PCs, they tend to be more kind of straightforward, logical, and the Mac is a very different. I've never used one, but I know from my friends who do, it's a very creative machine that creates graphics, etc. So men and women, if they have a different operating pattern, when we're talking to each other, we may desire the same outcome, but we may use words and actions that are not the same. So when we look at synergy, how do you put these two operating patterns together? You don't merge them so they both disappear. You actually allow them to be in existence side by side. And that's what I work with, is that we're moving from a world that has been very straight line in terms of business development over centuries, has been very male driven, structured. And then women have come into the empowerment of business and life. And we want to use emotions. And of course, the world has now discovered that emotional clarity and emotional intelligence is a really important part. So, and this is where we come to the element of masculine and feminine energy, which in the Mars and Venus example, it wasn't explained in quite the same way as I do with my gender dynamics intelligence. I say there's masculine and feminine energy in all of us. But we can see it in men. We can see some masculine-minded men, and we can see some feminine-minded men, and same in women. And that's where I thought, oh, this is great, because now I found who I am. Because I know I'm a female. I'm a mother and a grandmother. I love to nurture, but I have this magician-type mind. So I started looking at the physicality, and this came from my time as an image consultant. I started seeing relationships between different body shapes and different behaviors. And it might sound unusual. This was never in the Mars and Venus book, but when my book comes out, my next book is The Gender Dynamics of Life and Love. It will explain how the body type and the behavior can be mapped out together. So you might question, well, why do we need to do this? And it all comes back to the first statement of, how do we avoid a difficult conversation? We need to find out how we are different. So once we value that men and women are different, and different types of men and women are different, when you walk into the room of men and women now working together, we can have a sense of how to build relationships determined by their masculine or feminine energy within their baseline operating pattern. So let me explain it, because it might sound complicated. Let's look at men, for instance. The masculine-minded man is very much action man, because he's got a male operating pattern and he's got a masculine mind. So he's very into bullet points and action and tasks, more so than some of the more sensitive, feminine-minded men who maybe more what we might call a servant leader. They're a thinker. They're a thinker-feeler. I call them a philosopher, whereas I call the masculine male the ruler. Now, everybody has a place at the table, and that's really important, because we may start saying, oh, yes, that one's more difficult than the other one. It's not true. I think everybody can be difficult if they choose to be, but they also choose to be good. So remember, there's the ruler, who's more the masculine man, and the philosopher, who's more the feminine-minded male. I always quote Nelson Mandela as this one, because I think he was, bless him, he was such a wonderful example of a very intuitive but strong-minded. So when we look at women, you've got the sovereign woman, who is more feminine female. She's a wonderful combination of the queen and her. She loves to look after her people and nurture them, and often she's a very high feeler. She loves kinesthetically. She's got an amazing creative mind as well, but her preference is that nurturing of her people. And then the masculine-minded woman like me is more like the magician, and maybe that's why I'm the ambassador of magical conversations. But the magician is taking ideas and then grounding them, using her logic, but using also her nurturing soul. So when we start seeing these types, there's lots of other archetypes in there, but we have these as a starting place. And the biggest thing about having a magical conversation is knowing how to address all these people, but they're sitting around the table. And the leader of the pack may be any of them, because in the world that we're now creating, where men and women work together, there is incredibly amazing evidence, and also we all know this in our heart, that when we work together and we bring in these differences, actually it's a very magical mix, and it replicates what the world is about, because half of the world is female and half the world is male.
True that. And we have Ahmed, who says, and marrying both concepts can be very challenging. Absolutely.
And I love that you said that, Ahmed, because one of the greatest challenges is that men like less conversation and women like more conversation. And also the other one, which is very fascinating, is men tend to ask questions which have a question mark at the end and expect an answer. And so when they hear a woman asking a question, they think that it needs an answer, but not all questions that women ask need answers. And you're nodding, and any woman listening. And so what's interesting is when women together, we ask questions to evoke more conversation and more information. So it's almost like we're saying the question with a aha at the end. It doesn't, in our minds, it's not necessarily, I need a result, but sometimes it does. So one of the confusion for men is that they have to work out, when is the question a question that needs an answer, and when is it the question when really you need to not answer it?
True that. And sometimes I think we're just talking aloud. We're just clearing our mind and taking things out from the head and just kind of placing it outside so that we understand ourselves better, probably.
That's exactly true. And I often, especially when you're in lockdown, and my husband and I spend a lot of time together, I'll ask a question and he'll say, well, I don't know the answer. And I go, I'm not wanting an answer. and I said, if there were other women in the room, they would understand that. And it goes back to this operating pattern. So if you take it into business, which is one where we can get quite tangled, is for both parties to understand the other. So I often encourage my female clients to say, when, if the man is very bullet point and needing short answers, don't try and give him long answers. Watch the body language, but don't not tell them the idea, but place it in a way that can be heard. So I'll give you an example. If the leader of a meeting is the bullet point man, then you might honor what he's saying, say, I hear what you say, Is it X, Y, Z? Give him 3 bullet points back. If you want to offer an idea, you might say, I have an idea which I think will be useful. When can I schedule time to tell you? Rather than tell him the actual idea. Because I think sometimes, and it's a challenge for women because we're so enthusiastic that we want to share the idea. But if we get snubbed and the boss might be going, no, I'm not interested. He may not be saying, I'm not interested in you. He may be saying, I'm not interested at the moment because I'm busy with something else. But the words that aren't said also become part of the difficulty. And I love this. Ahmed says, tell me about it. I work with 6 women. I'm the only male in the room. So he's in an environment where the women are probably talking a lot. And I think it's very important that we listen to each other. So can I give you a quick example? I remember one person saying to me, I really get this idea that I need to spend a bit more time listening to my partner, female. And I said, yes, that's correct, and remember, if she's asking a question, not listening to answer it. He went, okay. He said, how long do I have to do it for? And I said, well, could you manage 10 minutes, 20 minutes? And what I discovered in my work with men and women is men are often very instructional. So it was an interesting, a woman wouldn't have come up and said that to me. He said, good point. I want to try it. How long do I need to do it for? So I could see his mind going, okay, right, 10 minutes. Now I said, you need to make that 10 minutes genuine. Yeah. You can't just be going, like this. But it's all about understanding our different habits, which may come from our core biology. And as we practice more, it becomes easy to do more.
True.
And I think another one, which is remembering that women have more conversation, and this came up with a class in Malaysia. We were talking about appreciation. Do men and women appreciate each other? And there's good evidence out there that if you ask many, many men, they will say, we really appreciate women. Like 97% of men say that. If you ask women, they'll say no.
They don't feel appreciated.
Now, what it is that the way we want appreciation has not been quantified or qualified. And I had this with a class participant who said, I'm male, Malaysian male. And he said, I'm very appreciative. And I thought he was very genuine. So I said, that's great. Tell me, what's the situation? Well, I come home, my wife comes home from work. She's dealing with the children, which probably quite a few, and cooking the food and doing this and doing this and doing this. And I said, oh, that's really great. Well, what do you do? And he said, what do you mean? I said, how do you appreciate her? And he paused, and it was so wonderful. There was this sort of, he said, I don't say anything. I keep quiet. I said, well, she doesn't know that you appreciate her. Now, I know you do appreciate her. And the challenge is that potentially you need to tell her several times as opposed to just once. Now, if you're out there listening, you say, well, I can't be bothered to do that. That's a choice. But if you do it, you will get an amazing response back, because this circular mechanism that we have as women that is nurturing needs nurturing.
Yep, absolutely.
So I think that's a baseline thing as well, that men are more instructional and men and women are less instructional, but we are very creative, and we often feel and think things that we don't express in a way that men hear correctly, and vice versa.
True.
So if we're going to get past the difficulty, we need to start tuning in to where the other party is coming from before we then allow ourselves to share what we want.
True.
Yeah.
And I like what you're saying here, because as you said, unless you say it out, a woman is likely to not understand that this is what you intend to say. My quote for today on day 1010 was, unsaid words sometimes fill your heart. What are your thoughts on that?
Unsaid words
sometimes fill your heart.
Yes, I think we need to learn to be more gracious and extra with our words where they're not said, because in that space of not saying, we may miss an opportunity to grow a magical conversation. And so what I mean by that is, I remember even a simple thing of saying, love you, say to my children, oh, okay, got to go now, love you. It's almost like, it sounds like a giveaway, but you didn't want to stand there and say, oh, well, you know how much I love you, darling. It may be a bit over the top, but just to practice smiling with your words and offering compliments. I think we if you look at those two different baselines, and the masculine and feminine energy is also has synergy to it, because the masculine energy is direct, outward going, and the feminine energy is internal and fluid. Recognizing these differences, we need to give compliments to the compliment. So complementary, and make compliments. And then the very important thing is accepting compliments and making sure that we address them in the workplace in a sensitive way. I think a lot of the difficulties we've seen with sexual harassment or women not feeling heard and listened to in the workplace, it started from misunderstandings of how do you address women's activities in the workplace when it's been very male. And it was interesting, we have somebody on the line who works in a very female situation, but I love that, being direct with compassion and grace. So I think when a man is advocating for a woman in the workplace, so that women can raise their profile and their career status in work, he's also needs to become a raving fan for that woman with the men. And so in a situation where he might say to his male colleagues, oh, this male, person is fantastic at doing operational strategy or whatever it is, can he do the same about a woman without concerned about, other men going to turn around and say, oh yeah, what's that about? Well, to stand up for the point that this female is an extremely talented woman and regards moving to a senior position. And again, it's about moving into the uncomfortable situations where we take ownership. So remember, in that core thing is it's choice, ownership, responsibility, and energy. If in order to move towards a place where it becomes totally natural that a leader, a CEO will be a female or a male, and they will have a balanced gender mix right through the organization, as well as all the other diversities. In order to get to that place, we need to understand differences in human people. You know what I mean?
Human people,
okay.
Yes.
Well, unless you become a behavioral study, or you self-development, or you're a coach, we don't get taught this stuff in school, and often, do we really understand people even when we've studied them a lot? I mean, it's almost is impossible to ever know truly what's inside somebody else's mind and heart and soul, but we can take a measure of understanding. And this is the whole point of when I work with the gender dynamics map, is it's like going out on the freeway. If you know where you're starting from and you know how to drive, you can get to the other end. We want to build relationships across the map. So is the ruler understanding that he's got magicians and sovereigns and philosophers around his table? Does he understand what value they bring to the conversation? And if you start placing that, as I do, in the context of crisis management, we need to know, we're going to use that person for this kind of role. So take something like good customer service. You want to have the element of females and feminine energy in there, because it's about relationship building. It's not to say you don't have to have the other end, which is the sales strategy and how many customers we want and how do we build loyalty. There's all sorts of things going on. It's like if we were all the same, it would be like trying to make a cake with one ingredient. You might be able to do it, but it's not going to taste very good.
Exactly. It won't even turn out to look like a cake. So I just wanted to ask you, what led you into this area of work? Because there's always a trigger. So what was your trigger?
My trigger really came from way back when I was a young girl and quite a tomboy girl, and I wanted to get to understand myself and why I was different to my own sister and my girlfriends at school. I went to an all girls school, and then this was back in the 60s, venturing out into leaving home and meeting boys and understanding myself as a relationship with somebody else. I thought I just want to be me, and when I was always very sort of happy-go-lucky, and I went through different stages of when I was a mummy, sort of, which I love being, but sort of, how did I present myself as a mummy? How did I dress? What did I do? And sometimes I would get it wrong, and I would feel not good. And it was that trigger. It's I want to feel really good about who I am. And in my late 30s, I trained as an image consultant. It was a very new industry in England. But what I discovered in that process was understanding bodies. It sounds weird, but when I suddenly clicked and I saw these different bodies in front of me, and the women who were more structured as I am, quite angular body, I suddenly realized they had traits like me. And then other women were different. And it was subtle differences of how we would approach things. And that's where it started from. And being sort of loving geometry and math, I started mapping it out. So it was the body shape. And then where did that fit in a dynamic with other people? And then the logic on my head started coming in. I thought, well, we're men and women, but we're not all the same. Yeah. And if I noted that John Gray, in some of his original discourses on Mars and Venus, said that, of course, although Mars was the men, there were a certain percentage of men who had softer traits, interesting, feminine traits. Yes. And there was a small percentage of women who had masculine traits. And that's really what I did when I started looking at creating a map. So I do literally have a map which explores this, and it shows the square part and the circular part, and then where you are, and then we identify body shapes. And I'm developing an online app for this, but I work with it physically in my courses. So Ahmed asked, does the body shape affect behavior? I think, Ahmed, what it is it informs behavior. So what I'm saying is it informs our core consciousness about who we are. And I'm not labeling it as absolutes, but generally our physicality impacts the way we walk into a room, the way we stand. And in my image work, I discovered that people with more angular features and straight lines liked angular and straight line garments and decorations and environments, interesting, and softer lined bodies. And obviously there's more to it than that, but they liked the softer ideas, softer designs. So if we look at the world...
We lost you a little bit over there. So could you just repeat which body type you were talking of? Okay,
so we're talking about a straighter line body shape or a curvy line. And I'm talking about the skeletal part, so not our flesh, but the bone structure. And if you think about it in simplest terms, we have a shoulder, a spine, hip, legs, and almost the way the skeleton sits on the ground, literally. So my bone structure is straighter, even though I have flesh that makes me curvy. My internal body structure, my hands are very straight. My headline is very straight. There's a facial connection between us and the way we perceive the world and therefore behave. And there's a lot of study about this, from Chinese through all sorts of history. But the way we walk and our actual posture, the way we sit is by our skeleton. So there's a masculine energy to it and a feminine energy to it. And there's more. We can go into that. When I do one-on-ones with people, they get to understand this more. And even if you just think about people around you and you watch them, the more angular they are in their features. It's difficult to give examples because I don't know whether everybody would know them, but if we took some celebrities like Pierce Brosnan and Tom Hanks. So Pierce Brosnan has a very straight
Angular,
structure,
yes.
and Tom Hanks is just softer. And interesting enough, they play roles which are aligned to their characters. So Sean Connery, Pierce Brosnan is more likely to be a Bond character type.
A Bond.
And Tom Hanks, even when he's playing Private Ryan, you know, there's a very emotive side to the story. And we can see the same in women as well. Now, it's much easier to see the extremes, and there's always a range of people in between them. But the ruler is a much more angular man. The philosopher has a softness to them. The sovereign is more gentle, curvy, and the magician is more angular. And interesting enough, there are more body types in my study of women than there are men. That's typical that women are more complex than men. But the main thing is that when we tune into our nature tells us everything we need to know. It will tell us what our natural gifts are before we ever went to school. It will tell us something about our core behavior. It will just, and when we tune into it, we will feel much happier and more healthy and aligned and able to have magical conversations. So it's very much about being yourself, but honoring others.
I know we're running short of time, but there's this question that's really burning in my head. We train people to speak, right? We train people to get into the skin of the speaker where they have a different kind of a body language. So do you think the inner core of who a person is also shifts when you learn to behave in a particular way?
Oh, I think so. I think there's almost that internal energy, that aura that we have as a human being becomes more genuine the more we understand our inner self. But it's also important to honor that with the best outer self. And it's a fine balance, because somebody might say, but why bother to do your hair or put makeup on or wear the right colors? I say, well, it's honoring who you are in the world and being really genuine. And when you really get sensitive to this, you can see when somebody is genuine and when they're not genuine. You feel it. And we're shifting in terms of how we will identify ourselves in business now, because we're going to be on Zoom a lot of the time. We may not go back to being in a suit and tie and being judged on how we wear ourselves, but we still need to wear our presence on screen. I think it's really important. I get my hair cut and do my makeup for me.
Yep.
I want to present myself in a way that I feel confident and happy with. And if it helps me to do a certain thing, wear a certain color, then why not do it? I think it's when we get attached to ego, then it goes wrong, because the ego is external and it takes over. So that search inside is matched and balanced with the outside. And that becomes, if you like, with the value cycle, it's our red arrow in terms of who we are in the world.
Yep.
And wearing a smile, so let me take back to a smile, is absolutely critical. You can tell when somebody's got a genuine smile and when they haven't. And in fact, women are very open with their facial expressions. They would say, we're not so good at poker because we don't have a poker face. Men have less the actual muscles in our faces, we give things away. But I think the goal for us in our future, creating a new narrative, is to be as genuine as we can possibly be about who we are. But I come back to, it's also about honoring other people.
True.
And I'm not happy with people who say, well, I'm just going to be who I am, and then they turn up and they impact other people in the wrong way because they are not fulfilling this cycle. They're saying they're genuine, but they're staying in that green arrow and saying, okay, I'm just me. And it's about tuning in. I would say, if you're going to go, it's about being appropriate. If you're going to go to an event and they say, this is how we'd like you to wear, and you say, well, I'm not going to do that, I'm just going to be totally different, and upset the host, that's not being kind. It's not being compassionate to what the situation is. It's all about being genuine, being authentic, and valuing your differences, honoring others, and having magical conversations.
Absolutely. But what about those who haven't really understood who they are? What about those who haven't understood who they are?
Well, I mean, that is the path that many millions of people in the world are taking, and that they're probably more traumatized by what's happening in the world because they haven't got that inner core. We all have the choice. It goes back to core. We all have the choice. There's plenty of information out there. There's plenty of support. How do you ask for support? Even though you may be in lockdown, maybe you haven't got a computer, but you can go out and find a tree or look at the sky or do something. You put your mask on and talk to somebody 6 foot away. But it's all about taking a choice to be a member of the universe. This is the world. We're all part of it. There's 8.5 billion people and we are one. It's about taking that responsibility and an ownership. And I always say as well, just as a trick, if you're going to start looking at yourself in the mirror, make sure you buy a good mirror.
I like that. And to clean it often.
Yeah. And smile at yourself in the mirror, because we know when we smile, and I'm a member of the smiling movement. I don't know whether you know about this, Ruka, but I must.
Oh, yes, I do. Yes, I do. Andrea, right?
Yeah, Andrea and Ken, we're working with them as well. When you smile, you create endorphins, dopamine, and oxytocin and serotonin, and help me with the other one, but we call it a dose of hope. So I love the fact that you've got the smile-tastic. It's wonderful. And the more we can smile and welcome magical conversations that start solving some of the difficult polarized issues, that is when we will change the world.
True that. And my smile isn't just the physical smile that it is. It is an acronym, actually. So it is silence the mind, manage your attention, identify the intention, let things go, and energize the possibilities. So there is more to the smile than just what you're wearing. And what I think is, it's not just about you feeling good or the other person, but also the fact that when you wear a smile, you literally short circuit your mind into looking for what is good in the situation. Yeah. Even if everything hell's broken loose, if you're smiling, your brain will automatically go searching for the reason for why she's smiling, why he's smiling.
Yes, absolutely. And I say one of the things is, everything we need is free.
True.
The smile is free. The looking at what's your natural gift, because your natural gift is not what you learned to school. It's what you were born with. And I work with my clients with that, because so often we've forgotten what our natural gift is because of many experiences in our childhood and at school, so many. But we go back and we find what those are, or the obvious ones, like, are you a musician or an artist or a linguist? But the other unusual ones, like being just very good with your hands or drawing shapes, is what I used to do, and being a chatterer, the being a persuader. There are different natural gifts, and those are the ones that we need to accelerate on, not necessarily seeking to learn things that we don't really understand, and then loading all that up onto our life, and then getting into it. Life is relatively straightforward for me. Maybe that's my masculine energy, but it's in our grasp every day. And yes, there are lots of external things that we can't control at the moment, but what you can manage and control within your heart and soul and mind, that's where to start. And that's the value cycle. Remember, it's like a life jacket. It's me, it's you and me, it's us. It's me, it's you and me, it's us. It's not about ego, it's about value.
True that. So true. And I love what you said right at the beginning about you being a listener, because that's the kind of friend I was too. I would say I was a loner because I didn't really have friends, but I listened to everybody. So if anybody had an issue, they would come to me. I'd listen to them. I'd hear them out. And I do remember a couple of my friends now, when I tell them, oh, but she likes this, or her favorite song is this, or she used to bring this in her lunchbox, because I have such strong memories. And my friends go, and why do you have this information still in your head? I said, I don't know, but it's those little things that you remember about people, right? And then when you connect with them after years, and then you recall, or remind them of it, they go, oh wow, she remembered.
Yeah.
They felt like they were heard, truly
Absolutely.
heard.
And that is really important, Ruka. I'm glad you brought that up. Is I believe that everybody you meet, there is some connection with. And I do an exercise with my clients on this, and it's so important, because people think, oh, no, I can't do that. And then they finish the exercise and they go, you wouldn't believe it. I was talking to Mary, and do you know what? Her daughter actually went to my daughter's college. It could be something absolutely bizarre, but there is a technique to doing that, and it's standing into that value cycle. As Hilary, my friend in England, who said, the inner work is most critical to produce magical conversations plus lots of expert communication skills. The journey from the heart to the head is a long one.
Oh, yes.
I agree, Hilary. And I think, but the key is be interested in people, and also be interesting. So, the exercise I would do would be to think of something, a kind of normal topic, like travel, or I don't know, singing or music, something. But when you start the conversation, you're investigating what is the other person's view on that topic. So you're taking a sort of general topic, but then what's your view? It's magical conversation. You're sharing your experience of that topic. And in that, so say we take the subject of travel, and I'm talking to somebody and they say, well, I've been to Portugal and it's fabulous. And I say, oh, well, I haven't been to Portugal. I'd really like to know what it's like. The fact that I haven't been there doesn't mean I can stop the conversation. It means I can explore it. So you're picking a general topic, you're looking at experience. And when you start digging down in that, you will find a connection. And that's when the connection becomes easy to remember. When you see that person the next time, it flicks up. If there's no connection, it will disappear. So it's finding the little connections that then create the future conversation, like you and me. We only met once. In that place, the connection was women, it was magic, it was changing the world. Those are the connections that make us now have this magical conversation.
Absolutely. And we have Prasad, who says, thank you for your interesting conversation about magical conversations, Dr. Pauline. Her inputs on gender conversations was truly educational. Thank you for tuning in. Super.
Thank you. And, if anybody wants to know more about my gender work, then just direct message me. I train people to understand the map. I will share the map with anybody who wants to come and chat with me. And we run classes, and we work with businesses to really move to that synergy. Real synergy for me is that in the next few years, in fact, sooner than that, we will always expect women and men to be working together with no exception. So we won't have necessarily any stuck situation where it's all male, all female, unless it's prescriptive to that particular business, of course. But there's a general acceptance And I have this hashtag, which is hashtag Women Empower Men, without the T on the end. So instead of
lovely.
instead of Women Empowerment with the T on the end, if you take the T off, I think it's now time for women to empower men, and also for men to advocate for women in a truly raving way. You know, if you believe that we are here to make the complement together, then let's do it. Let's really change the way things are. We've already got everything changed. So I think it should be simple. Look for the talent, address the woman's talent as part of the mix of your business, strategize it in, and then we can work with you to make sure the conversation flows. Patty asked, you know, when I've got another event coming up. I'm launching some intro to gender dynamics intelligence through LinkedIn on a regular basis. And I also run a monthly group called Create a New Narrative about real synergy. And the next session is actually on Monday. And Curtis has picked up my point, women empower men. Yes. I think it's really important point not to be aggressive about the synergy, is to be harmonious about it. So I will be running some more events, and I also have a one-on-one session that I do online through, I will post it on my Facebook page. So if anybody wants to come and experience the gender dynamics map for real, I'm very open to that.
Super. Thank you so much, Dr. Pauline. We have gone over the hour, and I could talk to you for hours and hours. It's like always magical. Thank you. For all of you who've tuned in right from the beginning to the end, I'm sure you were hooked, because this is so much of value, so much of wisdom that you've shared with us. Thank you. And if you are new to this platform, if you are new to the Facebook page or to the YouTube channel, do support it with a subscribe or a like, so that you can be part of more such conversations moving forward. Curtis says, as a man who doesn't fit the mold of men, I can speak personally that this is needed. Super.
Yes. And Curtis is a wonderful member of my Create a New Narrative monthly meetings. And thank you. And Hilary and Patty, thanks for being here as well.
So thank you, everyone, for tuning in this evening, this morning, wherever you're watching us from, and those who will be watching us on replay. Once again, do support the host platform, and I thank you immensely, Dr. Pauline, for your time, your wisdom, and the magic. Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A tiny little show reel of mine. Good night, everyone.